So after much needed research and so forth of our realm and reality, what I found and came to discover is that, besides the fact that we've been getting lied to from the mainstream science and so forth, the mainstream narrative, what I had discovered from my research is that, besides them lying, is that take everything that they've said and basically throw it away. And what I found out is before the new world, us, there was an old world. An entirely different type of world preceded us. It's a time thing. It's not a place thing. They would like you to believe that the new world is the West, and Christopher Columbus discovered the West, which is ridiculous. They're trying to basically hide the fact that there was a highly advanced civilization here, an old world order that preceded us, that was all over the world. There was no separation, no countries, no separation in languages, just no separation in hardly anything except for the type of vessels, the vast variety of sizes and types of vessels that were used by spirits like us who came into the hologram to experience the physical material world. And what you see on the right here is a building from the old world, completely different than a building here from on the left from the new world, our world. So we're the survivors of the survivor. What I came to find from research is some bad news. Is that before us was highly advanced civilization. In fact, it was basically buildings like this set up all over the world. And like machines, if you can tell these things, the building here looks very jacked, as I like to say, kind of like, Transformers and so forth, kind of very electrical, because we are in an electrical world. So there was a highly advanced civilization here that preceded us, that did things completely different. You can tell by the style of the buildings, they're more like machines. Very creative, very beautiful, very detailed, built perhaps by an entirely different size beings, by the size of some of the doors and windows that we see in these buildings. Perhaps their lifespans were much longer. And what it looks like is, what we find is there's buildings, these buildings, this highly advanced civilization before us was wiped out by some event. Something wiped them out. And we'll get to the evidence very shortly. Something wiped them out. And I'm going to get to some of the devastation here that we see. Oops. So what we start to find is evidence of an old world, highly advanced civilization being wiped out by some event. And I like to call it the X Factor event, because I don't really know what did it. So it's an X Factor. But we'll get to an idea. I do have an idea, though. And here is somebody from the old world, humanoid, buried in melted liquid hot building concrete and then hardened again. And then here, what we see here is this sand at one point during the X Factor event. The buildings, the grid melted. It looks like there was a grid meltdown to the point that the ground was flowing and like hot lava, except it was the buildings that had melted from the grid and the heat, and perhaps even some frequency vibrations from what is this realm, which is a Tesla coil, which, by the way, we built this Tesla coil. Sort of like a virtual reality for souls to experience light, etc. Our bodies are made of dense light. At one point during the X Factor event, the grid meltdown, the buildings were melted and flowing and viscous like hot lava. See the sand here? Again, I'll get to what I think might have happened. But look what happened to the buildings. This was all hot, flowing like lava, but it's liquid building, liquid red brick and concrete. Total meltdown. These are all buildings from the old world. See the arch here, brick lines. And what do we see here? Viscous. It was hot. It was very, very hot. And it was liquid. It became viscous and started to flow and become fluid and viscous. And then something else happened. It cooled off extremely fast, to the point it hardened so we could see these viscous holes. Again, when it started to become hot and fluid, it began to separate and form these holes. It was transforming from a solid state into a liquid state. And then again, something cooled it off very fast to the point it hardened back to a solid state again quite fast. And we'll get to that. I have evidence of that. And as we look down from the hot air balloon view, which is the only thing that can loiter over a flat plane, satellites don't exist. We'll get to a lot of things that don't exist. And again, what do we see here? Brick lines and buildings melting hot, top of a building here, and then what do we see here? What looks like a hot lava, flowing hot like lava, and it is all hardened back again. Notice what we see is complete devastation. In fact, it looks like it's still hot from the X Factor event. Again, these are all buildings that have been damaged by some event. What do we see here? Tops of buildings, super flat. Mesa, tabletop, tops of buildings, flat, because it is flat. Whoops. These are all pancaked brick lines, and then these are A-frames. It looks like the heat's coming up here, but we will get to that. Everywhere, buildings damaged, melted brick lines. And then let's look at the building here, melted completely. See the black scorch marks, see the dripping. Apparently still hot. This looks like a building melted here, and then it has a big still hot from the event. Again, look at that. It looks like it's flowing away from the building from it being hot, viscous fluid and melting. And then there's more brick lines, the top of a building dome. What type of event could have melted buildings like this? as you can see here, look at the melting, and these were all buildings here. You can see the arches, the brick lines, the domes, the towers. You can see that it's been flooded in its own liquid fluid. And then this was all very, very hot and liquid, like lava. And then when it cooled off real fast, it was so thoroughly cooked into fine grains of sand is what you get. But what happened? All I see, when I look around, is devastation. Let me show you the world in my eyes. I see nothing but devastation. Let me give you my theory on the X Factor event. My theory is that we're in a flat. Well, this is not theory right here. Let me set the table here first for us here for dinner, if you will. Again, we're in a Tesla coil. Okay. Above is the stars, and you have a sun and a moon. But in my view, possibly a theory, and this is why we call it an X Factor event, because I really don't know. But perhaps in the old world, before this X Factor event, there were two suns. Perhaps this moon here was a sun, or it was a moon, and it just didn't have this much damage before, and now it's damaged. But in my view, there were two suns before, and this was a sun, but now it's our moon. And what you see is just a lot of electrical discharge, just a lot of damage. I mean, major. Look at the electrical discharge. It just looks like a lot of damage. That has to be explained. Just like I'll get to all that. Just like this has to be explained here. There's a big, huge rift. The Great Rift, or the rift is what, in the dome here. A crack in the dome. And it's not the Milky Way galaxy, because we're in a flat Earth realm. And it's a dome firmament above that all these lights, all these stars are attached to the dome through magnetic levitation. Now here, it looks like there's a major crack in the dome. And then you have damage to one of the suns. And then, excuse me, you have just damage everywhere you look. You look up, there's damage in the dome. You look at the moon, it's got pot mark damages, electrical discharge, scorch marks all over the surface of it. And then you look around and you see what are you see mountains everywhere, which are actually melted buildings from the old world that have been melted and heat damaged by some type of X Factor event that wiped out most of these beings in the old world. We're talking about not billions of beings, not trillions. We're talking upward above quadrillions of beings living here in harmony by what the research from what I've seen. So it looks like there were two suns, and it looks, in my view, that something intentionally was taken over the plane here, the parasites, and we'll get to all that. And it looks like there was an electrical discharge from this, which was a sun, from the ground to the dome, or to the dome and to the ground. Vice versa, don't know. But it looks like there was a major grid meltdown, and we see damage on the dome. We see a rift, a crack, and then we see damage on the moon here, which could have been a sun. And then we see damage everywhere we look when we see mountains, which Used to be beautiful Terrarian buildings. So we see damage everywhere. Let me get back here. I know I was showing the damage here. This was all liquid hot in it. When you have two suns, right? And one of the suns, like right here, gets shorted out. Initially, there is a huge explosion and huge amount of heat. Everything was super hot, thousands and thousands of degrees that melt red brick and Terrarian concrete to the point that it looks like they're getting melted like ice cream into what you call mountains today. And you get an initial heat that just is so hot, but again, it dissipates. It goes away. Not only that, you have, instead of two suns, one of the suns is now malfunctioned. So instead of two suns, now you only have one sun operating, putting out the light and heat. And again, this moon here measurably puts out a colder temperature now. When measured out of the moonlight, shade, the moonlight measures colder than the moon shade. Now it's putting out a malfunction, degrading frequency, perhaps putting on us our bodies or vessels on a death cycle and reducing our age. Either way, it looks like the buildings were very hot and they were melting, and then something cooled off very fast, because instead of two suns, now you only have one sun. This one's malfunctioned. There were two suns. Now you only have half the energy going out, half the heat. So what happened is when the buildings were melting and crying, they were dripping, 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 and boom, they hardened instantly in midair. All of a sudden, because of this lack of energy, because of this one sun instead of two suns. And perhaps this is why we also got a flood after the fact, because after all, everywhere you look on our flat earth plane, it was buildings, and they've been melted and then flooded. Melted and then flooded. All the continents are tops of buildings. That's right. Tops of buildings. And you can see how the buildings have melted away. But where it didn't, you can see where it's sharp and still steep. Everywhere the natural ground floor, if you will, ground zero, the natural ground floor is the bottom of the ocean. As you can see, the natural ground floor is the bottom of the ocean. As you can see, you have major damage. Major damage. And it's been flooded. Flooded in. Everywhere has been flooded. And the toppest parts of the building remain above water, because it's been flooded. And then here it looks what looks like a Lichtenstein effect, but it's all melted buildings, damaged, scorched, melted, hot flowing like lava. And again, what I think could have happened is when you have all this moisture in the air, that is no longer supported. You have all this gas vapor in the atmosphere, and now you have only one sun operating. Well, guess what's going to happen? There's not enough energy now to support all that moisture into a gas vapor, and it will liquefy and turn from a gas vapor state into a liquid state, cool and condense and rain and flood. Heck, it could have rained for 40 days straight and nights for all we know. But everywhere we look, when we do the research, all we find is damage and devastation. I mean, this looks like this part of the building was blown that way. The tops of the building blown that way. And everywhere you look, we see red brick buildings completely melted and flowing and getting blown, the color carbon-14 blown into this area here, and it's really hot white here where the color's been cooked out. It's all melted buildings, tops of buildings. And you can see how you can go down into the regular, the regular ground, the regular floor. Ground zero is I guess it's not. I'll have to go to the next. Is down here. See you down here? This is the actual bottom of that's actually the ground. Everything else is buildings. And we'll get to that. And this right here, looking from the satellite view, scorched, burnt, melted buildings everywhere you look. Here you can see brick lines, buildings floating. It was fluid, liquid melting, running, flowing, hot like lava. You can see it, liquid flowing everywhere. You can see the way, which directions the buildings are flowing over. You can see how the buildings were flowing that way and out, covering the ground, flowing out, covering the ground. You can see how it's flowing out from the melting. The buildings were melting and flowing from the X Factor event, spreading out, melted. Everywhere you look, devastation, melted buildings, messed up by some X Factor event. Brick lines, the entire buildings turned into mud, dirt. It's like liquefaction. It's like the grid meltdown was so hot, maybe it was putting out a frequency that assisted in altering the states from a solid into a liquid, because, I mean, that's, you got windows here, top of the dome, arches, columns, brick lines, everywhere you look here. I mean, this is all was buildings and brick lines and arches and buildings. And look what happened to them. They're all just flowing like melted, like ice cream. And then look at all the entire flat earth plane, the dielectric plane of inertia. The grid has been melted. Look at all the buildings melted. Islands are tops of buildings. And again, you see more buildings melted. Everywhere you look, damage, melted buildings, and then flooded. And look at this older map. What do you see? All over here, nothing but melted buildings. And then look at the top. Look at the top here. Islands are the tops of melted buildings. Look, that's shallow in here because that's the top of a building. But the water's coming over it. It's shallower there. Tops of buildings sticking up. Buildings that have been melted and flooded, and then tops of them sticking up still. Look at that. Tops of the buildings sticking up. But you look and you can see how high these buildings are and how deep it is down to the bottom of the ocean floor where the real ground level is. It's all melted buildings. Everywhere we look, melted buildings. Melted buildings. Look at the flowing here when it was viscous. Look at the building here. Look at the melting. This was a grid meltdown. You can see the melting. You can see the waves of the melting. You can see the damage. You can see the waves of the melting. It's quite incredible. The evidence is right in our face that an old world order, excuse me, a highly advanced civilization preceded us. And within, I would say, 500 to 1,000 years ago, something happened. Maybe, and what do we see here? Melted buildings here, flowing down this way. See it? Flowing that way. Melting. Look at the building melted and it starts to flow. All this is smooth. See how this is flowing away from the building? Flowing away from the other building there. Again, look, it's all melted. And again, more evidence of the old world being flooded, damaged. What do we see here? Buildings. Everywhere, buildings. Melted, flooded. More evidence. Here they are, flooded. Look, buildings melted. Look at the melting here. That's all melted from the grid and then flooded. And then more evidence of an old world civilization in the past, highly advanced. Flooded. Brick lines. Highly advanced, melted out by and destroyed by some X Factor event. Look at all the brick lines. Look at the arches. Look at the cracks. All flooded. Buried, but not forgotten by us. Look at the melted red brick here, melting. All caves are melted buildings. And here on the left, melted buildings. Brick lines right there. Melted building, flooded. Huge, huge melted buildings. I think this is from One Breath Around the World. And the dude's swimming. And there's melted buildings everywhere. Evidence of a past civilization. And then in the Wikipedia, when you look up, they tell you that there's a dome at 13,000 feet. Not Wikipedia, the encyclopedia. They try to hide that fact. And then what do we see here? Melted buildings, Antarctica, and it looks like a dome. That looks like a dome. And you can see it. I can see the dome myself at night. And again here, old world civilization, highly advanced, melted, destroyed by an X Factor event, and then flooded, but not forgotten. We're the survivors of the survivors. Evidence of buildings in Antarctica. Everywhere you look. Look, tops of buildings. Buildings flooded. Buildings flooded. Buildings melted. If they're not flooded, well, they're all melted, even if they are flooded. And again, look, you can see the buildings. You can see the tops of the buildings that have been melted into that mush. Still remain above the flood, where it got flooded. As you can see here, the water has come in here and flooded this. Only this remains above the flood. This was all brick lines, and it's all melted. Everywhere you look, it's smooth and melted. Every little dot here are tops of buildings. These are all tops of buildings flooded. All these little tiny dots, tops of buildings flooded. Tops of buildings flooded. Melted and then flooded. And again, look, more evidence. And this is what we get. This is how the old world did the floors a lot. These little individual tiles, decorating, creating, co-creating, in harmony. like they had all the time in the world, and it was just important to deck out everything they touched. Had to be completely decked out. That's the style of the old world, highly advanced civilization. Everything they did was completely creative. Everything. And again, what do we see here? On the right and left, expanded red brick and concrete from the X Factor event, and then flooded. And again, look, brick lines melted, flooding, flowing. Buildings turned into mud and dirt. And then what do we see here? Another victim from the X Factor event. This is all that's left of the skull of a person that got crystallized from the X Factor event from the old world. And this is all that's left of a building during the X Factor event. All this was flowing hot like lava. It surrounded and flooded this building here. It surrounded it. You can see the top of it here, flooded, submerged in its own heat. And this is all that's left of red brick. You can see the windows, the arches. This is all that's left. This was all flowing hot like lava. And then, like I said, you only have one sun now, so you only have half the power now. And it cools and condenses very fast into sand. And then, again, what do we have here? Another victim. Looks like a spine, eyes, nose, nasal cavities, skull. You can even looks like hair. But again, buried in liquid, hot, melted building and turned back into concrete. Because that's what it is. Everything here, and there's a hand here. A victim of the X Factor event. Teeth here, covered and buried in hot liquid, melted red brick buildings, and then hardened again. And then again you have another victim, evidence, skull, teeth, completely buried, possibly buried alive, and then it was hot, viscous, burned them up like lava, buried them, and then hardened back up like concrete again. Because that's what it is. It's concrete. And look, that's hard as a rock. It's concrete. And not happy about getting covered in hot concrete and then turned back into rock. That's hard as a rock now. Because that's what it was. And then here, somebody getting in pain. Looking down. The hand here in pain down on the ground. Hot flowing lava from melted buildings. And then hardening and flowing and over these. And then hardening like a rock again. Here. A horse. Covered in hot liquid building. That's all red melted brick. Flowing over this horse here. See more red brick. And it's hard as a rock now because that's what it is, concrete. But the building became so hot from the grid meltdown that it flowed over this horse and fried it, burned up all its flesh, and then hardened like a rock. And then more victims of the X Factor event. All buried, drowned, flooded by this hot liquid melted building, hot like lava. Here they are, victims, more victims of the X Factor event. You see what used to be red brick back here. All this was hot flowing. Here you have gravel here because it was churning brick and concrete into tiny pieces of rock from the heat and flowing and being cooked in this hot liquid red melted building lava. Again, you have this, what's left. Everything else is melted red brick, flowing like concrete, flowing like lava, Some of the bone left. Some of the bone left here. And you can see the holes where it was viscous, coming apart, separation, flowing, and then it hardened like a rock in concrete, because that's what it is. Another victim. Another horse victim. Buried in liquid melted building. Flooded, buried. Here is a whole room of humanoid beings from the old world, completely buried in hot liquid melted building. Here, this used to be red brick. And they're inside here, and it's all liquid building melted, and they got fried and cooked. Same with this one. And again, you can see how this got all hot. You got your red brick here. It's going block. The whole area is completely flooded by hot liquid melted building. And they were flooded and killed with it. And again here, more victims of the lava flow of red hot brick melted buildings. And again, they all seem to have their hands tied here. Again, that's not a good way to go, to be forced to not be able to run from the hot liquid building and to get flooded from the pain. Then somebody comes along and walks on it after it cools off and condenses into that. No longer is it hot lava. And again, we see damage everywhere. This was all red brick, and it's all been melted and damaged here. Again, what do we see here? Scorch marks, melting, and damage. What do we see here? Completely melted. Completely melted and flowing that way. The X Factor event. Evidence of an X Factor event. Melting a building right there. And then more damage. Scorched marks. This is from the old world. Inherited from the Tatarian, the old world. Most everything here was inherited. We inherited everything. So when they came over here and said Christopher Columbus came over here and discovered everything, wrong. Didn't happen. All these buildings were already here. All these railroads were already here. Everything was already here. Nobody built everything, and we'll get to that. But look at the damage here. You'll notice the old world columns here, and looking like a motherboard on a computer grid. Again, you see pyramids all over the world. You see them all over the world because it was a grid. And you see here all liquid hot, melted red brick. It's all buried and it was all flooding. This was all hot like lava at one point before it cooled and condensed. And it was cooked into fine grains of sand, except for the bigger parts of the brick here. And again, what do we see here? You see a building, and then you see damage like this on the side of it. It's melting and expanding from the grid heat melt down. Nobody came along and carved this out of a mountain. This is not a mountain. Mountains are melted buildings. And again, I'm showing you that this is a building and this is it melting from the grid meltdown. And it looks like a mountain there, but it's not. Mountains don't exist except for the buildings that got melted and you think they're mountains. It's just melted buildings. Again, right here is the building being melted from the grid. And it's expanding and marshmallowing and swelling out like a balloon, like somebody blowing up a balloon, like a balloon rock. And it's melting hot. And it looks like a mountain now. So only part of this building was damaged. But sometimes the entire building gets damaged and it looks like that. And that's all you get. And it looks like that, a rocky mountain, because that's all that's left. But it was a building. And again here, I want to continue to expand on the evidence here of you have buildings here. You see scorch marks. Look at the damage. You have red brick, and then they spread the concrete finish over the brick to give it an upgraded, updated, new look. Here you have scorch marks. You have melting. You have heat. You have the side of the building here expanding out, and it looks like a rocky mountain now, because that's how mountains were formed. It didn't, in this case, this didn't have enough heat to turn the whole building into that. Are you getting it yet? Are you seeing where mountains really came from? Are you seeing that all mountains that look like that? That's a mountain. That looks like a mountain. It was first a building, and it got heat damaged into a mountain. There it is. It's a building. Nobody came along and carved a building into a mountain here. Okay, that's ridiculous. But that's what everybody says, because they just haven't done enough research yet. Advanced research. But what I have found is nobody came along. This was not a rocky mountain. Nobody came along and built a building around this. This is a huge building, and it has been damaged, and it looks like a rocky mountain now. Look what happened to the red brick here. This was all red brick. This was red brick. This was red brick, and now that looks like a rocky mountain, and now that looks heat damaged and scorched, and looks like stone now. But it was all red brick. And again, you see that? See all the heat damage? That's all damage from the X Factor event. It looks like a rocky mountain there. The bottom has swollen up and out like a mountain. It looks like a mountain there. And again, right here, it looks like a mountain there. But the building from the bottom, the grid got hot, and it expanded, melted out, balloon rocked the bricks, and it looks like a mountain now. But it's just melted buildings. And again, check out this incredible evidence here. Again, you have these steps, and around the steps, it has heat damage and swollen out. And look at this damage here. See, it's dripping and expanding and churning and swelling from heat. And it looks like a rocky mountain now. Look, that was hot and expanded and churned from heat. Nobody came and carved a building out of this little mountain here. It's a building that's been heat damaged, but most buildings, the whole thing gets turned into this rocky look. The whole thing, and that's how you get a mountain. That's what I found in the advanced research. And here, the skull at the top, buried in liquid, melted hot lava concrete. That's all concrete. Look at it. And again, everywhere you look, devastated buildings, damaged. Look at the arches here. It goes on and on. And this is me in Beulah, Colorado, standing on melted building. And what I found here in this, what was flowing hot melted building, what used to be red bricks, but they call them volcano rocks now. You can see the holes. It was viscous, and it looked like what they call a volcano rock, but there's no volcanoes anywhere around here. It's all melted buildings. And again, none of this is from volcanoes. It's from an X Factor event that melted buildings. Behind me and right here, melted buildings. And here I am doing a home inspection, and I come down into the basement, and I find this. I find the old foundation from the old world Tartarian Empire, the red brick had melted and expanded in this way, and they just built around it. The New World Order came along and just built around this. See how it melted down, out, and out? See how it was viscous and how it was hot and expanding? See the holes here from separating and coming apart? See it flowing this way? See it flowing this way into the room? And here's a different house where the red brick, the ground was getting hot, the grid was melting, and it was squeezing out the mortar from in between the bricks, down and out from the heat. We call it mortar snot because it's dripping like snot from the heat, from the X Factor event. Here it is again. Melted red bricks starting to melt. And again, here's a house in downtown Pueblo, old downtown area. Notice the ground. Notice how the ground was completely hot from the ground in here. Look what it did to the side of the building here. The house here I inspected. Look what it did to the sidewalk here. Look at all the damage. And all the heat came from the bottom. And let's look at the inside from underneath. What happened to the red brick? What do we see here? When I'm inspecting these homes, I'm going, what is going on here? We got red brick, and then we have it damaged, heat damaged. This all used to be red brick. All this was here from the old world. We just came along, probably between 500 and 1,000 years ago, and built on, around and over all this stuff. Of course, this was already here. This is red brick here, and then it's damaged red brick here, melted from a grid meltdown from the bottom, and all the floors in this house, all the wood is bowed and warped and heat damaged. Not a single level floor. Look what happened to the red brick here on the left. That was all red brick, like the right. Everything should look like beautiful red brick. Everywhere you look, beautiful red brick. It should look like beautiful red brick. And all the wood is heat damaged and bowed and warped. Every floor is bowed and warped. In this house I inspected, everywhere there was red brick, and then it got turned into block and stone, like you see here. And all the wood in the house didn't catch fire from the heat coming from the bottom, but it did heat damage and warped all the wood. All the floors are completely bowed and warped and unlevel. Look what happened to the red brick of this house that I personally inspected. And this is how I figured out that the red brick was being cooked into this. Because all these houses I'm inspecting, they're thinking that it's built like this with stone, not realizing that it's damaged. And right here, this is, I don't know why, but somebody put a piece of wood in here and it looks like a red brick, and it's not. Because I was right there. I grabbed it. They put that in there, I guess. I guess the other one just fell out or something. But that was all red brick. See how it expanded and started balloon rocking and marshmallowing and trying to form little blocks here and separating. Look what happened to the red brick. I personally inspected this house. I've been a home inspector for over almost 5 years now. Going on 5 years. Look what happened to all the red brick here. So it's my duty to report this, or I'd be kind of negligent. But this is how I discovered that red brick was being melted by some type of grid X Factor event. There's a highly advanced civilization here before us. And this is all that's left of the red brick. The rest of it's been cooked into that crap. Expanded around, the old wood is all damaged. I've seen insane heat damage from some type of grid X Factor event meltdown. Insane. Insane heat damage. Everywhere you look. So let's take a look at what might some of the sizes have been by the sizes of the doors and the windows built by some of these buildings that were built by the beings in the old world. As you see here, this is not a Tatarian, but he has the body size of what was some of these Tatarians. You can't see the whole door here, but you can here. Look at the short person here, and then look at the door here. So you have, he's this high, and the door goes up to here. Here's the doorway. Somebody normally walking up about this high would grab a handle up here. He can't even touch it. Or up here. He can't even hardly touch it. Again, look at the doorway, and you can imagine some of the sizes of some of these beings. And again, it looks like, here's another person our size. Again, in my view, they had all sizes, all different shapes of vessels, different, we'll get to it, but in my view, you'll see a particular door size at this height here, and then you'll see our size. And the majority of them were this size, and then a lot of them were our size. And then you had bigger ones and so forth, but the majority of them were probably, in my view, you had this size, and then probably the 10-footers. Obviously, maybe for this size door here, because that's pretty big. But that's pretty big. I mean, that's huge. And again, look, big dude, small dude. Again, everywhere we look at the old world that we inherited, everything that we look at shows different sized beings. Here's this guy, his head comes up to this right down here, and look at how high the doorway goes. And again, how big do you got to be to open this door? I mean, look, that's steel, you know. The handle would be up here, he'd grab it, walk in, being this high, don't want to hit your head. But that's the size of these beings. Look at the doorway. And again, look how tall she is here. She's enormous. We're walking down here, and she can't even go inside these. She's too tall. They have these rooms for the smaller people and the bigger people combined. You'll see that in the way they built. They had rooms for different sized beings built into these buildings. And look at this door here, because you'll see different sized doorways, different windows, all kinds of different stuff, and rooms for different sizes of people. Look at this door. How big it is. Imagine trying to move that door. Of course, maybe they had a button. Boom. They were highly advanced. They just push a button. Boom. But, or you could just be a big giant and open it real easy, because it was built for you. Again, look at the size of the door here. Look at the size of the ceilings in this place. And again, not a Tatarian, but residual body size from the old world. Tatarian, old world order body size. And again, look, they can't even touch the railings. Look, they can't touch the railings. And look at these guns. They can't even hold them hardly. And again, different sized beings, different beings with different, the animals and the humans were not separated yet. You had what looks to me like beings with animal bodies and human heads. And the reverse, humanoid bodies with all different kinds of animal heads. And they even depict them a lot with wings. Some of these people might have had wings. Some of these beings from the old world might have had wings. And here, another depiction of a different animal face or head on a humanoid body. And this wings, look, wings, tail. I mean, this thing's got wings. And then look, what do we see here? Depiction, elephant head, bird head, dog head. I mean, I don't know if that's a dog head. Animal head, dog head, not very looking friendly head. I mean, damn. At all. Look. I mean, this being here, it's got the animal body and a really, really human-looking face, nostril there, but whatever. Bird head, again, that looks like just another different head, animal head on a humanoid body. And again, not looking very friendly. What does that look like? Vampire teeth. I don't know. And again, look at this dude. Vampire teeth. Size of those eyes, but a human body. Humanoid body. And another depiction of a being from the old world. Looks like they communicated between worlds with ease, possibly, back in the day before this disaster of the X Factor event, this cataclysm that perhaps sealed us from other worlds in communications with other beings. And another depiction of a dog-headed looking humanoid. And you got your regular looking humans. And then you got some dudes with some giraffe looking, I mean, whatever type of freaking head with some human body. But still has the fur, animal fur. But it looks like some type of animal head here. Perhaps, I don't even know what to call it. Maybe. And again, what do we have here? Humanoid body. Humanoid body. Reptilian head. Some dude in this. Female reptilian, I guess. It's got breasts. It looks like, and this looks like it ate a human. But it's symbolic. But again, this is melted, scorched. It's a statue from the old world. And again, another statue from the old world. He's got hoofs, but very human. Human neck and head, but obviously it's an animal looking, but human looking too. Again, in the old world, in this highly advanced civilization, there were all different kinds of looking beings. You have humans, human heads, human torsos, mixed with animal bodies, even fish. So there was some water. Obviously before the flood as well, obviously. And here we are, depiction. That looks like a dog head, except he's got flippers for feet. Same with this thing. Looks like a mermaid. And it can just hold its own fishtail body in its hands. And again, this is armor for a dog-headed humanoid. And there's a dog-headed humanoid. Werewolves? Are you kidding me? They had dog-headed humanoids. And this dude's walking around with some type of, And again, here we go again. Yeah, the caduceus. I know that. But again, it doesn't mean it was a bad thing. Could have got inverted. But look, humanoids with animal heads. And here we go, dog heads. And they're toting around these animals on their friggin' heads. Human bodies, wearing clothes. It's got a dog head, wearing clothes. Look at the clothes. Obviously, part of the statue broke. And again, that's not looking very friendly there. At all. I don't know. If I saw this guy, he'd look like a werewolf. He'd be kind of scary looking. I mean, look at the dog head, but look at the human hand and human body. And then obviously look at the scorch and the damage and the melting and the conquered as well. But again, it looks like this highly advanced civilization had all kinds of different size beings, all different kinds of animals with different bodies and mixed up with humans, torsos, fish, animals, you name it. It's all fair game. Just any vessel will do if you're a spirit coming in to the hologram and your torus field manifests your body, your form, densifies it, maintains it. You could pretty much make anything if you had the codes and the frequencies you could mix and match any type of shape you wanted, really, if you just had the codes. That's all you needed. And again, here we go. Dog-headed human body. And then here, not even a dog head. I mean, this is almost a human head. It's got the human ears and everything, except, boom, the mouth just maintains that, the dog. And here we go, human body. And a dog head here. Dog head. Looks like a dog head. And these are statues here. Concrete molds. Statues. And again, look at this. This is an actual armor that like knights wear, except this one's for a dog-headed knight. Here we go. Dog head, human body. And again, it's my view that we've been invaded by etheric parasites that can't do a single thing here unless they get somebody in the physical world to do it for them. So they trick and infest humans and perhaps the dogs, or dogs backwards is the gods. The gods concept most likely came from the dog-headed humanoids that were infested by these etheric parasites that needed these guys and perhaps other humans as well as to do things in the physical world to create a world where there's suffering. They feed on the negative energy of suffering. When you look at this world, there's all this unnecessary starvation where food gets thrown away because they don't have money. And it's all made up suffering. It's all generated unnecessarily. Why? To provide food to the etheric parasites. And they have to trick beings in the physical world to do their bidding to create the world they need so they can eat. And if they don't create a hell on earth, they starve and they can't eat. So that's an easy way to defeat them then. We create a world of love with zero misery that starves them out of their food. Zero fear, zero misery, zero suffering. They starve and die. And then there's a world that is truly free again from the parasites that generate negative thoughts in our heads to divide, constantly divide and conquer this world. And they're not nice. And they are not nice. They hate us. The parasites have to infest other beings to control us and to create the hell on earth so they can eat. What do you see here? You see a different human head on almost every single one of these, and they're all human bodies. I'm sorry, animal heads. I meant to say animal heads. There's a different there's a different animal head on every one of these things, but they're human, all human bodies, but short, small, midget-looking bodies, dwarf, perhaps style bodies. But look at this one's rabbit head. Is that ears or horns? It doesn't matter, but there's all different kinds of animal heads on humanoid style bodies, even if they're smaller bodies, some bigger. And again, in my view, not only were there all those different beings I just showed, but beings with 4 arms on each side. I would love that, to have that. Are you kidding me? So you got all different kinds of beings here. You know, all different kinds of vessels were being used here at one point. And it's in my view that there was an agenda to wipe out all the giants, all the different looking humanoids, and to trick us into just one vulnerable vessel, a human vessel, completely vulnerable to the weather and to everything outside, completely vulnerable to the point of where, you know, you need breath, which is spirit, to survive here. It's the quickest thing that you can die from. We're completely vulnerable where we need water. 3 days without water is rough. 3 weeks without food is rough. You could die. We're very, very vulnerable to the I don't know why I can't think of it right now. I apologize. But to the environment around us, if you will. Our bodies, our skin. It's my view that all the insects and predators were introduced after the X Factor event to create more food and suffering. As we suffer, we create more food for the parasites. It's my view that we're very vulnerable. We go outside and you watch these shows where they try to survive, and they're vulnerable. Their skin is getting eaten by insects and all this suffering. And it's my view this is all intentional, and all these things were introduced. So let's look at more of these. And there's a cow-headed humanoid. And then let's look at the size of these guns from the old world. And again, left over from the old world. And again, he's got the size, body style of the beings from the old world. Look at the size of the sword here. And the sword here. Built for big swords for bigger size people or beings. And again, it's my view that you have our size body style here was very prevalent, as well as was probably one of the most popular. Besides, this was the most, and this was probably the second most, but this was probably the most prevalent size in my view, this higher size than us by the windows and doors and so forth, and then us. And then, you know, you have all different sizes, but probably majority of them were looking about that size and our size. And again, another depiction. Everybody's probably seen this before. Look at the size of these beings compared to us. But it's in the old world, we had all different size beings. There were gentle giants, very intelligent, wise beings everywhere. Look at the size of these books. Look at the size of the guns. Big guns for bigger sized people. He's got the bigger size body style from the old world. Residual body style from the old world. Look at the size of this gentleman here. And here's us. Again, this is the size that walks in these doors. And these windows are built for. And these ceilings are built for these bigger gentlemen up here. From the old world. They have the old world Tatarian body style. They're not Tatarian. They're survivors of the survivors. But they still had the body style before it was wiped out, in my view. An agenda. There was an agenda by the Smithsonian to go around and collect anything from the old world and bury it under the Vatican, etc. In 1909, people found pyramids and buildings and you know, they found mummies, all kinds of stuff that they said, oh, it looks like it's from the Oriental. But it's because it was a one world order and it was the same everywhere. There were pyramids everywhere. There were buildings with organs in them with healing frequencies everywhere. Look at the size of this guy. Look at the clothes that were already available. Because it was a highly advanced civilization. They had all this stuff already. And then we ended up inheriting all these buildings and all this stuff from the old world. Things that survived. Not everything died and was melted, because when you look at the major cities everywhere, these are all buildings that survived. They're mostly red brick, but in the more popular areas, the red brick's been updated and upgraded by the Tatarian concrete molds over the red brick. They drill holes into the red brick, dip a steel rod in some concrete, put it in the hole, and then attach the updated, upgraded Tatarian concrete molds piece by piece over the red brick. You see it everywhere in the cities. You had tall people, small people, what you would call dwarfs, not midgets, dwarfs, and fairies, very small people. And look, skeleton of an old world size body style. Look at the size of some of these beings, some of these humans from the old world. Again, look how small he is down here. Look how big he is up there. Look how big he is. That was a normal size. See the doorway here? See how it lets him in without having to duck. Look at the baby. He's bigger than this guy. And look how small these guys are down here. I mean, look how small they are. And again, there was an agenda to wipe out all body styles and vessels that did not look like the way we look now. Look at the size of these people down here in the door. And look at all the melted heat damage on the door here. And all these is concrete molds over the red brick. Highly advanced civilization. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Andre the Giant. I forgot his name. And look at the size of him. Look at that hand. Goodness gracious. Look at this guy. It's huge. Huge. 3 huge gentlemen here, and then he's normal, our size here. But see, they were extremely athletic, it was their size, it was normal. Look at the size of this sword. But, this guy, gentleman here on the left, he couldn't use that sword. It's built for this guy on the right. Gentleman on the right is huge. Look how big they are. Look how big this guy is. Look how big they are. Very, very big. Very big. Oh, wow. Look at this door here. And it looks like you could open it right here, down here. It looks like it opens. It looks like it opens right there. And look how tall these beings were compared to us. Look at the size of this door. It's enormous. It is enormous. And by the way, that's beautiful looking. Their architecture is gorgeous. It's glorious. And another victim. Look at the size of this Tatarian. Looks like it got in a fight with a snake. But this is all liquid hot melted building. And they were flooded in it and died. You have your different sized beings. Our size down here. And then the other size, and this guy's even bigger. Look how big they are. Big guns for big people, big doors and ceilings for big people. Look at the size of the door again. And here's us. And then look at the size of this guy. Boy, he's big. And look at the clothing. Just impeccable style. in the style of the old world. And again, look at this door. Look at the bike down here. And look at the door. It's enormous. It's enormous. This is how we know the size of these. Because you don't build doors this size unless there's people, a lot of people that size.